Longing for you, pick up the phone. Catching a flight, I'm coming home. Back to the place I've always known. Home, home. Seeing you soon, I gotta run. We're gonna have a lot of fun and spending this summer alone. I'm coming home. I'm coming home. You were only like a friend, till we met the other day. Didn't want the night to end, and now there's a wind of change. I've never ever felt this way. You're stuck inside my mind, deep inside my mind. I think that now's the time. Longing for you, pick up the phone. Catching a flight, I'm coming home. Back to the place I've always known. Home, home. Seeing you soon, I gotta run. We're gonna have a lot of fun and spending this summer alone. I'm coming home. I'm coming home. I'm counting hours, minutes, seconds, faster. Hurry, make it happen. Before we knew it, I'll be on my way home. Yeah, we're chilling, I just, you and I. Every crazy summer night, baby, I am coming home. I'm coming home. Longing for you, pick up the phone. Catching a flight, I'm coming home. Back to the place I've always known. Home, home. Seeing you soon, I gotta run. We're gonna have a lot of fun and spending this summer alone. I'm coming home. I'm coming home. I'm coming home.
Never thought I'd be so far from home. Never thought our love could grow so cold. Never thought we had to run through burning fire. Never thought I had to miss you and I. Life changes as we know it. You do what you can, you just get through it. It's a mystery how people can get by on as little love as you and I. Never thought I'd be so far from home. Never thought our love could grow so cold. Never thought we had to run through burning fire. Never thought I had to miss you and I tried to stay into outgrowing. Time changes people, we both know this. It's a change of season when the tide comes rolling in, and you realize there's nothing there to begin. Never thought I'd be so far from home. Never thought our love could grow so cold. Never thought we had to run through burning thought our love could grow so cold.
Can't find a time where I can tell ya what I feel now. Been biting my tongue for a while, the words just wanna come out. I'm too afraid to be rejected, it's so expected. I feel like I'm out of my mind, but I know I can't deny you. I am so alienated, sitting on planet X. I'm becoming the person I've hated. Wonder what will happen next. Yeah, I don't know why it's like a charge around us that just feels right. Can't get my head around it, I can never hit the brakes. Every time you touch me, babe, you send me right out into space. You send me right out into space. Right into space. I'm not the kind of person who is sentimental, but this thing is making me soft, giving into my damn heart. It feels like I am losing my grip, going crazy, 'cause this doesn't make any sense. You're broken down all my defenses. No way back to the old me, when I'm stuck here on planet X. I'll become the person I've hated. Wonder what will happen next. Yeah, I don't know why it's like a charge around us that just feels right. Can't get my head around it, I can never hit the brakes. Every time you touch me, babe, you send me right out into space. You send me right out into space. Right into space. My head tells me to stop, but there is nothing I can do. No. When I'm with you, I lose myself. I feel good. Oh, yeah, I don't know why it's like a charge around us that just feels right. Can't get my head around it, I can never hit the brakes. Every time you touch me, babe, you send me right out into space. You send me right out into space. Right into space. Yeah, I don't know why it's like a charge around us that just feels right. Can't get my head around it, I can never hit the brakes. Every time you touch me, babe, into space.
All my thoughts are running round inside my head. Emotions keep coming, they're keeping me from thinking straight. Thought it would be different when I got my things in place. Stuck in this commotion, how come I ain't past this yet? I wanted me to be somebody else, another me that doesn't need your help. But if I'm honest, I don't think we got it. I try to change the things you never liked, try to make this better, make this right, but we're the same, even though I changed. Really made an effort, promised I would change, but something stayed the same. Wanted to do better, wanted to be great, but something stayed the same. Something stayed the same. Something stayed the same. Start a life in the country, I could say yes to that. Whatever way you want me, I'll learn it all and I'll adapt. Even if I changed up, everything except my name. We will still be fighting, cause I am still the same. I wanted me to be somebody else, another me that doesn't need your help. But if I'm honest, I don't think we got it. I tried to change the things you never liked, try to make this better, make this right, but we're the same, even though I changed. Really made an effort, promised I would change, but something stayed the same. Wanted to do better, wanted to be great, but something stayed the same. Something stayed the same. Something stayed the same. I can change the way I am, the way I talk, the way I stand. It doesn't really matter, cause I'll still be the same. I can change the way I am, the way I talk, the way I stand. It doesn't really matter, cause I'll still be the same. Really made an effort, promised I would change, but some things stayed the same. Wanted to do better, wanted to be great, but some things stayed the same.
And she would try to act cool, but it was obvious, like ooh, they would be together, ooh. Then one day she said, write me a love song, cause I know you'll make it beautiful. And maybe I'll call you my sweetheart, and promise nobody can steal me away. Then I am yours, cause I want you, and I wanted you to know. He looked at her and then he smiled, picked up a pen and paper, and started writing. Probably something about her eyes and how they're always shining, or something cliche like ooh. Baby, I only want you. It's true. And then he said, I wrote you a love song, and I tried to make it beautiful. It's a song about your sweet, sweetheart, and how nobody can steal me away. Yeah, I am yours, cause I want you, and I wanted you to know. As he sang, she started to dance, grabbed his arm and took his hand. He held her close under the moonlight as they kept on dancing. And now they're singing their love song, and they sing it kind of beautiful, calling each other sweetheart. I promise nobody can get in their way or steal the show. They're in love now, and I wanted you to know.